skies are blue as the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are.
Hiya everyone and welcome to Over the Rainbow Show with your host Bob Brown on Friday the 30th of March at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 o'clock Pacific Time and 8 p.m. UK time. And to all the listeners from around the world, you can go to Beacon of Light Radio chat on Facebook, or you can Skype me at Beacon Light Radio. Well, I've just got to tell everybody, but I've had my operation yesterday to remove, I'm going to say, a foreign object at the back of my ear. I asked about that anyway. But everything seems to have gone well. I'm a lot better today. I was a bit raw yesterday. I did a show last night as well, but I was in a little bit of pain. But today, the pain is gone. So I feel 10 times better and ready for an absolute fantastic show today. Well, we haven't got one guest on. We've got two guests on. What about that then? So we've got Bret Colin Sheppard on and Ken Johnston. They're both extremely great people who've done lots around the world. Ken's been a civilian astronaut consultant. Bret's he's a fantastic artist as well. Besides being a bit of a psychic as well, because he comes up with things and thinks about things, and we'll be talking about all different sorts of things, what's been happening, what the government don't want us to hear. So can we please welcome Ken Johnston and Bret Colin Sheppard to the show? Hello, you guys.
Hey, hello, Bob. A real pleasure to be on with you.
Hey, thank you. You know, I know, talk about Ken and being a civilian astronaut. How did that come about?
Oh, well, actually, about the time I finished up my tour with the United States Marine Corps in 1966, my brother, Dr. A.R. Johnston, was a NASA government employee down at Houston at the Manned Spacecraft Center there. And he says, you know, well, you ought to get yourself down here because they're looking for people that are both pilots as well as avionics, electronics technicians, et cetera. And as a matter of fact, that's what I was, a single multi-engine instrument-rated flight instructor and degree. And electronics is one of them. Aerospace engineering is the other. So I booked it down to Houston and went around to 5 of the major aerospace companies back in those days and got offers making a whole lot more money than I made when I was in the Marine Corps. So my choice was to go with the Grumman Aerospace Company that built the lunar module spacecraft. Well, they were looking for people with our backgrounds, and we were classified as civilian astronaut consultant pilots, which meant that we substituted for the regular NASA astronauts during all the vacuum chamber testing to be sure everything was good and safe. Jokingly, we called ourselves guinea pigs, if you want to. But that's the way we were able to test it. And then anytime one of the regular astronauts wanted to get inside the lunar module spacecraft, they would have one of us consultant pilots in there to answer their questions and be sure they knew how to fly it and have a successful flight to the moon and return safely back to the Earth. And I think we succeeded.
I'm sure you did. It's so fascinating, the Apollo program, what it involves and training. It must be lots of training to get there.
Yeah. One of the things that I get a big kick out of is we have all of these people that were, needless to say, born a long time after we went to the moon. And, they'll say, the world's flat, or no, we faked going to the moon. There's a whole lot of information in there. And they say we never went to the moon. And I tell them, okay, I ask you a question. Do you believe we have a Hubble telescope going around up in space? Oh, yeah. And it had taking pictures of the moon, correct? Oh, yeah. I said, and they have zoomed in on our landing sites for each one of the Apollo missions to the moon. Yeah. And I said, and it shows the descent stage of the lunar module still sitting on the moon, and the ones that had the rovers shows the rovers setting outside a little bit away from where the descent stage is. Now, how did they get to the moon if we didn't go there? Long pause. Well, I'm gonna have to look into that. So that's my.
Yeah, well, a lot of people say that to me. Did we go to the moon?
Well, just
a lot of people are saying we didn't go.
Well, you can pin them down. The problem we run into is that they don't realize that back at that time was what we called, the Cold War with the Soviet Union. And I can acknowledge, agree, and I've even seen them, some of the fake video movies. They weren't videos in those days. We didn't have it. We just had regular motion pictures. And they did create some videos that looked like they were on the moon. They were created in studio, and that was in the event that something went wrong and our spacecraft crashed on the moon, or they died on the way coming back to the Earth. It was really important that the United States proved that it could get to the moon and return safely before Russia could. So they're just not getting enough of their information. If they would just people out there would do their own research and find out the truth, instead of listening to other people that think they're smart alecks, but they don't know what they're doing and they haven't checked the records. Yes, we went to the moon.
I was going to say that, because it's everybody what posts some things on YouTube, and people get disillusioned about it, don't they?
Oh yes, they sure do. One person will post something that is that we can debunk them very quickly. I mean, and Bret Sheppard is one of the best researchers I've ever run into, and he digs out information. He can prove to them very quickly that yes, we did go to the moon. But yes, there were some other events that took place.
It's I know we're just trying to get Bret back on again.
Okay.
He's gone off again.
Well, I'm here for now.
Oh, he's back on again.
Better get him while you can. Get him while you can.
We were just talking about people going to the moon, and a lot of people say, no, we never went there. So what do you have to say about that, Bret?
Well, we did actually go to the moon, and not very good equipment, and we had extraterrestrial or secret space program help to get there.
Well, let's say
higher technology to get us there.
Not that they helped us get us there. What they did is they observed to be sure that we were able to get there and get back. So they were there, particularly on Apollo 13. That it was apparent that if anything else had gone wrong and we were unable to get them back, they were standing by to be able to rescue the crew. And this is all based on information that I've received fairly recently, and I think Bret may have a little more on that. Am I correct, Bret?
Yeah. Basically, they were already on the moon through Project Horizon. They had already built a base there. It was a co-op base with the Russians, and something happened politically. They didn't get along so great or whatever. They fell out with the Nordics that were there, or High German or whatever you want to call it, and they actually decided to keep helping us, even though there was a lot of misunderstandings, and they were like, these Earthlings are babies, basically they can't get along, something's going on. So these people on the moon saw to it that we got there safely, and NASA really didn't think that we were going to get there. They had already contingency plans, because there was a no fail option. It was during the Cold War, so failure was not an option, and they had to keep going with their program, even if they couldn't get there.
Let me jump in there. Let me jump in there a minute, Bret. I'd say 95% of the people involved in the space program, even working for NASA, were not aware that we had a secret space program and that we had bases on the moon already. Now, so
they had no idea.
Right now, and as you mentioned, the extraterrestrials were involved along with Russia and the United States and the bases, and That's information is coming out right now. What we're calling the full disclosure that everyone's going to be able. The biggest problem we've run into, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the United States, Great Britain, and Canada have withheld their records and information and their contact with extraterrestrials, whereas it's now coming out all over the world with other countries. I mean, China, Japan, South America, et cetera. So the information is coming out to the public. The only problem is getting our news agencies that are government controlled to back off and allow the tsunami wave of information to come forward for all the people around the world to know the truth.
Right. Rhonda's in the chat room said, isn't the Russians affiliated with the aliens?
Yes. The whole, all the world leaders are.
Ah.
Well, let's say that all of the legitimate world government leaders.
Politics and all of that is a show. There is no politics in science. They're all on board together.
Right. Yeah, I think Rhonda just said. I think she just said they've been there for years, like they have 5 UFO ships.
Yeah, she's talking about the 6 large UFOs that look like space shuttles almost, that William Tompkins was talking about, that were on the crater during Apollo 11. And it's what the astronauts apparently observed. According to William Tompkins, there were several high-up officers at NASA that knew about these things, but it was on a separate channel. So they could actually see what was on the crater, what the astronauts were showing, but the public couldn't see it. It wasn't on the same channel.
That was using the S-band antenna you're talking about?
Yes, using the TRW S-band antenna.
Right.
Right. Can you tell us a bit more about the base, what's on the moon then, and what they're doing actually up there?
Well, the first lunar base during the 50s was really crude. It was tubes. Parts of the base were made out of lava tubes, to protect them from radiation. So there was a lot of that discussed with Arthur Trudeau, or General Arthur Trudeau, and President Eisenhower at that time. So they were actually building the base as a strategic military base. For Earth, no. For extraterrestrials, yes. So the ETs that were up there on the moon already had pretty much a interstellar co-op with other planets. And yes, there are many different types of ETs on the moon, and they work together. They can't get us to work together is the problem.
But why can't we work together with them?
You could answer that question. You could have that's the biggest question in the world. I think it goes back to, if you're going to look at the creation and who we were made in the image of, and this goes all the way back. And Bret, you can keep me probably back before the Anunnaki, who also were a bit of a warrior type species back. Oh, good Lord, hundreds of millions of years ago. But they, since we had our DNA of our own species here tweaked a bit with theirs, we inherited a bit of their anger and warlike. Since then, they've changed, we've changed, and it's time that we become a little more of a peace-faring species instead of a warrior type.
Yeah, Matthew's in the chat room. He just wants to ask, what kind of people are the aliens? You're describing that they live on the moon. What do they look like? Why are they more advanced than us? And is it possible it is linked to religion in some way?
Yes, there's a lot linked to religion. They do not do patriarchy. They are all about the creation. There's the big, everywhere kind of God that they believe in, and there's the creation, which they have a higher veneration for, and they consider it, matriarchal or feminine, and they all, have tried to get us to do the same. So they've actually put ideas in some of these gurus' heads in northern India, around 6,000 years ago. They've actually tried to do that. And we are not listening because we have to have big rockets and big buildings and big ships and big military, So we have this patriarchal, very hierarchical, male-dominated world. So this is one of the things that we have to get past.
Yeah, you might go in a little bit on the different species of extraterrestrials that we've been made aware of. Let's go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, the ones that I know of, as far as who the military met, there were the etherics, who live in another dimension right alongside of us, or on top of us, or with us. And then there is those ones that Gerald Light was talking about that appeared and disappeared on the tarmac. It's a little bit disturbing to the scientists. And then there were the Nordic types, which I think it might be a code for the paperclip Germans and their ancestors. So this Nordic type, the Teutonic types.
Well, you've got the grays, you've got the short grays and the larger grays, as well as come on, Bret, help me with all those. You've got the reptilians, and
I would say the reptilians,
right?
Yeah, and reptilians.
Insectoids.
Yeah, and there are a species of moonlings. Some of them they're green for one thing. They're kind of a greenish, fleshy tone. And some of them are really big and have the Anunnaki heads on the moon. And they have a slave race of minions that work their mine on the moon. And they're these green beings that kind of look like grays, but more like E.T., the head, And they've got really big eyes. Their feet are backwards like a chicken. And they have really, really big feet that kind of look like hands. So they can climb really well. And so that's one of the weird, strange species that's on the moon. And they're very friendly. And they wish that more nice people would be sent to the moon instead of these military people.
Right.
They're really annoying to them. Yeah.
I can imagine. So most of the ships, what we use now, what we see in the sky, the UFOs, are they ours?
Not all of them, no. Some of them, the reverse engineered ones that people took pictures of in the 70s were based on Hanabus and some of the Project Paperclip craft. And they had just discovered neutral buoyancy. It's a step that the Nazis really couldn't get a grip on. Schauberg was just working on it right after the war ended. And he brought that technology here. And I know a guy that worked at Hughes Aircraft, and he went to a garage that his friend was working on something, and he wanted to show a couple of guys what he was working on, and it was a little UFO engine, and it actually created neutral buoyancy, and the thing lifted off right in the garage. So we had achieved electromagnetism, Earth technologies like reverse gravitics, which is actually a neutral buoyancy, the way it's described. And it uses an electromagnetic type field, a self-containing field. So it's not dependent on whether it hits the ground or deflects off of the ground or something like that. And so we've had that technology ever since the 50s, this neutral buoyancy type technology, and it was probably based on some of the Roswell reverse engineering type craft. Our craft that we reverse engineered is extremely primitive compared to some of the light ships and other weird things that the ETs have. They don't work necessarily in our environment.
Now, what might say one of the things that I just recently, within the last 6 months, have been made aware of, and that is that because I was a part of the fossil fuel rocket engines, Saturn V's that went to the moon and back. But then when you get to looking at what was being tested and checked in the secret space program, where you had the neutral buoyancy, as he calls it, I call it anti-gravity or neutral. This is you don't see UFOs and things with big flames coming out the back of their rockets and things. And one of the reasons why, partly of the secret, why we continued on and risked the lives of all the astronauts going into space was to keep hiding the fact that we had that type of engineering and technology. So here we go. That was one of the other things I want to talk about, Bret, is that almost every one of from my understanding, almost every one of the Apollo astronauts came back and told privately that yes, they were followed all the way to the moon by extraterrestrial craft, as well as while they were there and the way back. So it's amazing how well secrets can be kept. So I mean, if you look at that, looking back at when the hydrogen bomb was being created, how well that secret was kept. So it is done.
Yeah. I know Ron is. I'm going to ask a question, but I was going to ask the question as well. All these people what go missing around the world, are they sent to other planets?
Okay, Bret, you want to go on that one?
That's a very good possibility. I've heard of workers that would go up there with the elite people to the moon. I actually know someone that occasionally still does that. And I know someone else that works for the NSA and says that they work on satellite dishes on the moon. So they do have service people on the moon.
And they'll get looked after and fed.
Yeah, and
most of them don't come back. No.
Well, the part of that though, and we're going to go ahead and get into Mars. If you look at the possibilities of the Earth being in line eventually, that's going to be hit by either a larger enough asteroid, etc., that to see that the human species does continue throughout the whole universe here. They have been taking people and sending them into Mars and creating more of a Bret, in fact, that wasn't recently. We're talking about quite a few thousands of people that are now actively working on Mars. Is that correct?
I don't know that for a fact, but I've heard the same from people.
Yeah, I know, like Andrew Bashago, and that's something else people may not be aware of, and that is we've seen it in our science fiction deals where they, beam me up, Scotty, electronic teleportation. That apparently that's been going on for, let's see, Bret, you're going to have to help me on this one because I know in California where they had the first jump room, that was wasn't that back in the 60s?
Yes, that would have been in the 60s.
Yeah, I've heard that as well about it being used, and they're still using it today.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, like that,
they also
Bret,
have the great big ships.
Oh yeah, Bret and I are waiting in line to get teleported over there to Mars and see what it's like.
At least
I'm not
waiting for that. I could care less about going to Mars. Yeah.
Right. When did that first start out about teleportation then?
The teleportation, well, Andrew said it started in like the late 60s or early 70s and continued on into the early 80s, around 1982. And I guess they had somewhat perfected it by 1982. And after the experiments were done, which was what Andrew was part of and a couple of other people, they had disassociated themselves from them, to maybe just make them look crazy or free them from that life. They were just done with them.
You're talking about those that retired from the secret space program?
Well, yeah, these were actually children that were abused. They were traumatized. They were used for these special programs. So, I know Andrew talks kind of like the technological aspect of it or whatever. But as you know from the Montauk experiments, from other government experiments, they're not just utilizing the kids for some scientific purpose, but also, they are abused. Sorry about that.
Yeah. But when they take some of these photos, they rearrange them and take things out. So when they want to show us photos, the UFOs have disappeared or they've done something with them, haven't they?
The UFOs have become actually a lot more active here in the last year. Everything I've been checking out. So is that what you're referring to?
There's more UFO sightings now than there's ever been.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. Okay.
Right.
But when the government have took photos in the past to show us, they've dabbled in them and deliberately altered them and modified them.
Oh yeah. Well, we had to originally modify or reverse engineer back as far back as Eisenhower and 1948, I think. Correct me on that. And over the years, we've in Area 51 and some of the other very secret bases where they continued to improve on the first craft, even like the original Germans Hanabus. That's like driving a Model T compared to a hot sports car. So we've made some progress.
Can you tell us about the I think it was Colonel Lauren Debrisky, Apollo 13 boarding an ET craft?
On Apollo 13, I mean, this was one of the things from what I got from the astronauts is that they were followed all the way to the moon, around the moon, and then on the way back all the time, being prepared to board and bring the three astronauts over to one of their craft to save their lives. That was a save all thing that could take place if needed, and so it was something followed all the way back. In fact, some of the questions that were asked to the astronauts and encoded that kind of like on one of the missions where it says, "Yeah, Santa Claus is good and clear where you see him on his way." So you have to you have to know the code.
Yeah. What actually do they do at Area 51 then?
What do they do with what now? I'm sorry.
Area 51. What actually happens at Area 51? Because a lot of people would like to know.
Yes, they would. And I have to admit, I have never been to Area 51, so I can't be held responsible for not knowing. So I can't help you there.
But there's a lot of UFOs come out of there. People have seen them flying backwards and forwards, landing there.
Right.
There must be something happening below the surfaces. Oh
yeah, and Bret and I were just I guess about 6 months ago, maybe a little less, 4 months ago, we're up in Dulce, New Mexico. Yes. And of course, you're aware of the underground bases there in Dulce. There's been a lot of activity in around, and William Whitecrow, of course, was involved with the Dulce area, and unfortunately, he just very recently, he passed away on us, and fortunately, I had the privilege of being with him up in Mobile, Alabama, for the space program conference that we had going on, and now the man's no longer here with us, and he's the one that had a lot of the inside information with what was going on there in the Dulce base. So the Dulce base, the Area 51 was so well secret, know anything about it for such a long time, and then now everybody, Area 51, but few, if any, actually go there now. In fact, they keep moving the access to the top of the hills and things like that further back, so that if you were to go out there and try to drive up, you could get up to where it says you can't go any further, And if you do, you'll see security guard trucks or vehicles and things observing to be sure that you don't try to get down into the Area 51 base. So we still have a lot of secrets going on.
Yeah, but do you think we'll ever get to know? Will Trump do a little bit of disclosure? Do you think?
Oh yeah, I'm certain that President Trump, we will certainly get a lot more information with him in presidency than we would have with any of the Clintons. I'm sorry, I hate to get political, but if people, before they get mad at me, I'll tell them, do your own research, find out how many people lost their lives trying to go up against that internal political control. So at least Trump doesn't know anybody, any big hunk of money that got him in office. He paid for his own program. Now, Bret, I think you're back. You were telling me just the other day that how many millions and millions of dollars Clinton spent on trying to become president, and how much was spent by Trump. Are you back on? I see his dot up there, but I don't know if he's live.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Wasn't it something like Trump spent like only $3 or $4 million or something, and the other ones were up in the double, triple digits?
No, I mean, I'd hate to tell you this, Ken, but Trump is the president because he's a liar and he bought his way in.
I see. We have a conflict right here.
You
can say that because he doesn't.
Well, they all presidents did that. All of them do that.
I'm not going to use the word all because that's all inclusive, and so see, we do have some disagreements.
Yeah, ever since the robber baron days, they have bought their presidents.
Oh,
the president does not run anything.
You mean to tell me that Andrew Bashago and I are going to have to spend a lot of money to run for the president and vice president next election?
You guys will never become the president under this regime. So.
Okay, I'll accept that. I
like it.
Now, Bob, you have to understand, I've attempted to adopt Bret because I'm old enough to be his dad. So it's okay.
He's the perfect dad. I don't agree.
That never happened.
That's the best way, isn't it?
Yes.
So many levels. Can you tell me about William Tompkins then, and the craft and the building on the moon? Did he have something to say about it, or did he go there?
Yes, Ken had met him right before he passed in Las Vegas at the MUFON Symposium.
Well, I re-met him, as a matter of fact.
Yes, re-met him.
It goes all the way back to when I was with the Johnson Space Center there in Houston, and for a brief period of about a year and a half, I worked for the TRW Corporation, and that was at the same time that William Tompkins. Now, he was in a different stratosphere than where I was. I was just a lowly little engineer, and he was, involved in all the secret stuff and things going on. But when he was, let's see, was that Contact in the Desert where he was last, Bret? I don't.
That was at the MUFON Symposium in Las Vegas.
That's right. Okay, and I got to make contact with him again, and just enough to agree that we had made contact before. And I was really looking for a similar thing happened to who was this thing? Not Zachariah. Yeah, Zachariah Sitchin. He was. I was all set to go to Colorado Springs when he made his last public appearance, and something came up. I wasn't able to go, and then doggone it, they checked out on us. That's terrible. Now if you're dyslexic, I'm only 57, but if you really do your math, I'm 75. So. To me, that's not old. That's not old. But
yeah, I am a bit psychic. I mentioned to Ken that we will not have William Tompkins very long, and then he needs to go meet him.
Yep, and you were right. And I did go, and I did get to meet him again and reconnect.
I met him, and not even hardly a month later, he was gone.
I know. So the question is if you're real good friends of mine, what's going to happen? Don't go there.
Well, I mean, no, he had lived quite the life. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, I suppose he was a nice guy to talk to and get some information from him.
Yeah, Bob. I'm going to come visit Bob now. That might be dangerous.
Well, I'll tell you what William Tompkins left us. He left a legacy of what they actually had and saw the Apollo 11 astronauts saw on the moon. And they
Yes.
saw this and knew about this because of lunar orbiter images, the real ones, not the garbage that we get. So, TRW basically saw some of these photographs, the previous unmanned missions, which was lunar orbiter, which showed buildings, ancient buildings. We also saw translucent buildings, which were parked like a building could be 3/4 of a mile high, glass be a mile and a half above the surface of the moon. That same set of images showed 3 different areas on the far side of the moon, which had ancient structures on the surface of the moon, and they also saw those before any of the manned missions. So you can imagine when the Apollo 11 astronauts got to the moon, how freaking stunned they were.
Yeah.
There was actually, they were looking at, most of the stuff went to Huntsville, where Werner von Braun was, and some others who ran the program and had access and could analyze these things. And they did decipher these at the command center in Houston. Everything went to Huntsville. Dr. von Braun at Debussy facility. That's where he was when they saw the elites saw these images and video. They were running it, and there were other facilities on the moon besides the 200-story rectangular building floating a mile off the surface, like streets or roads and on the surface, and that they had photographed. So all of this stuff was new and classified, so that the higher ups knew a bit about the mission before going there. The astronauts did not know anything yet because it was a need-to-know basis. That was the purpose, but they found all this stuff, and the actual mission Apollo 11, when they first got there, before they got to the moon halfway, Tompkins says what I'm about to say or wasn't broadcast to the public at the end of the mission, but NASA got it. And that there was a number of huge vehicles who were closing in on the Apollo vehicles, which that was surprising, which is now just the S-4B stage. The Boeing first stage of North American second stages were gone. And now we have the S-4B stage and the lunar module. Basically, we were a very small vehicle, he says. Then this massive extraterrestrial vehicle is coming up on us, and our transmission antennas, they're all watching this, so we can see this coming in. So they're actually at TRW seeing this giant craft coming in, probably around the time when they're passing through the Van Allen belt, so they can throw a force field on them and basically a tractor or whatever and tow them in toward the moon. So this great vehicle looks as though it's going to hit us, but at the last minute it didn't and had no intention to. It simply came in, moved around us, and finished its orbit. Then those guys eventually hovered on the edge of the steep part of the crater, at the high edge of the crater where the Apollo 11 Eagle landed, and the personnel that were there on the mission were knowledgeable about what was there. In other words, they knew about some of the things that were already there, but the astronauts did not know. Yeah, the astronauts were actually on the mission. We're told to look for that one coming in around the backside of the moon on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was saying before.
Yeah, one of the things I want to clear there, Brett, is you said it was the lunar module with the S-4B. No, it was on the way coming back. Of course, that was the command module.
Command module and the lunar module, yeah.
Right. I want to be sure they got that straight. And then well, the other thing is, I know you're very versed on this, Brett, and that is if you go back far enough to the Anunnaki and the experiments going there, when Enki went to the moon and took his son with him, and so that goes back. You're talking about thousands and thousands of years. That some of these ancient ruins that are still visible on the lunar surface have an ancient history going back all the way back. Now, Sasha Lessin, he has published numerous books that cover a lot of that information, which I found fascinating once I because you have to understand, to be a part of the space program that we were in, we were fed the information that we needed to do our jobs. And then whenever our particular phase of that was finished, we most of us got laid off. We had to go to another contractor that had a new contract and keep working on that part. It took a long time for Bret and others to convince me that we weren't the first ones to get to the moon. And now that I've been able to look at all the information and records and things, I know the Earth isn't flat. I know we went to the moon. I know we came back. So it's been
somebody got there before us.
Oh yes.
Right. Yeah. And contemporarily, the astronauts reported during their orbit around the moon before landing, talking back and forth about different facilities they flew around, confirming what they had seen on the unmanned lunar orbiter missions, confirming what was photographed. And yes, that stuff was confirmed and went back and forth in the conversations, even with such clarity that one building was reported to be a bit southwest of its original location and so on, none of which the public heard, including Mission Control. What got back to the command center, Mission Control, was split too. Not everybody there heard everything. Others covered it up, and from the normal public, probably because of the Brookings report. What I'm saying is that we had huge vehicles pass before we landed and came in and were there and passed by as we left. They were considered friendly. When the astronauts climbed out of the lunar module, they had already seen these machines in space on the way toward the moon. Isn't that cool?
It's cool as well. Ken, I'm going to ask you about your autobiography, The Human Experience, the Smoking Gun that reveals the dark mission of NASA.
It's amazing how you can get dubbed with certain cliches and terminology, and it goes all the way back to when I was with the Boeing Corporation. I was one of the flight instructors on their Boeing 737s for about 3,000 hours, whatever. At any rate, we had a group of friends that we listened to Art Bell on the radio all the time, and he had Richard Hoagland on there a lot of times, and Richard would say things like that. I know there are people out there that have information and they need to come forward while they still can. And my friends at Boeing, this was before we had cell phones and electronic transfers. We only used interoffice mail envelopes, and we would send copies of the latest information we'd find out back and forth with each other. And one evening I wasn't scheduled to take a new flight crew up, and one of my friends called me. He says, "Oh, Richard Hoagland's going to be in town tonight. You ought to get over there and get a chance to see him." Well, I thought, hey, what a great idea. I took, I made a letter and issued a letter telling Mr. Hoagland who I was and what I had been involved in at that I was the director of the Data and Photo Control Department at the Lunar Receiving Laboratory, and that I had an archive. And so I took that and dressed up nice and went out to the conference next to the Space Needle they have in Seattle, and walked up to the desk to buy my ticket so I could go in. And I handed the lady my letter, and I said, "Oh, this is an introduction to Mr. Hoagland." She looked at it. She looked at me, and her hand started to shake, and she says, "Oh my God, you're who we've been looking for, and don't move." And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I am in trouble. So she rushed to the back went into the auditorium where they were getting ready to start. In a couple of minutes, Mr. Hoagland came out with the letter, and he looked at me and he says, he confirmed who I was, and he says, "Okay, come up, sit on the front row, and over this tomorrow morning, we'll be over to talk." And the next morning, he and 6 others showed up, and they were going through some of the archives and records. By the way, I wasn't foolish. I kept all of my archives in a huge safe. I had to leave it there and get a little bit smaller one when I came down to New Mexico, but it was a double door, 3,000-pound fireproof safe, and I'd taken things out, and they were just flipping out because they were looking at first generation photographs made off of the original negatives in my archive. And in fact, that while they were looking at one, my wife was looking. We hadn't paid that much attention to them, and gosh, this was in 1995, so a good 30 years since we went. And my wife says, "What's this reflection in this astronaut's visor?" And they started looking at it, and I said, "Oh my God, you can tell that it's a craft that was hovering above the crater where they were." Well, that's how I went up there. Let's see, what was your original question here? You're going to have to keep me on track.
About the smoking gun.
There you go.
Thank
you, sir.
Of
right.
NASA.
Well, that was just it. This was about the time that Mr. Hoagland came out with his dark mission, The Secret History of NASA, in which he quoted me and put quite a few pages of records and information he got from me. And at the time, I was one of the chosen, what do you call them, solar system ambassadors. And I was going around to all the different schools and colleges and organizations and giving lectures and talking about what we were doing with the space program and being a good little individual and telling only the good stuff that the people wanted to hear. And the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, they were contacted by a guy by the name of James Oberg, told him, well, he's out there telling these lies and all this stuff. And I got a call from JPL, and they said, I think you need to resign as one of the solar system ambassadors. And I said, well, wait a minute. Don't you have employees that talk about different things like that? Well, yeah. I said, now they're being paid, aren't they? She said, yes, they are. And I said, but I'm not being paid. This is volunteer, correct? She said, yes. I said, well, then I don't think I'm going to resign. You'd have to fire me then. And as a matter of fact, I took off the next day with Mr. Hoagland, and we flew to Washington, D.C., and then we went before the National Press Club, where we had, and he had about 4 other very much involved scientists and engineers that were involved in the space program. There we gave our presentations to the National Press Club and all the various countries. And as a matter of fact, so it was after that I got dubbed with the whistleblower. And it wasn't something that, you go out and look for. But the main thing is that I learned from Mr. Hoagland. He said, what we have to do with your archive and what you're doing, we need to get you into the public worldwide so people know who Ken Johnston is, the whistleblower. And because the people who haven't, there have been lots of people that have gotten close to the information that have had various kinds of accidents, that have died, they've gotten diseases and sudden diseases and died. And he says, we need to keep you around. And so I have been constantly tracked around the world where I've given speeches and talks and things by Oberg and some others and trying to debunk their game they play is that they go out and attack the credibility of the individual, not what we say, not what we're saying, right. But they attack us and claim that, he never went to the moon. I never said I went to the moon. Well, he's not an astronaut. I never said I was an astronaut. I said I was a civilian astronaut consultant pilot with the Grumman Aerospace Corporation. So, this is what they do to try to debunk you and shut you down, because they're trying to stick with what the Brookings Institute at the time, and we're talking about what this, Bret, I think it was like about 1948, 49, when, or a little bit earlier, when Brookings came out with it, that said that the evidence of the existence of extraterrestrial life would be found on either Mars, the moon, or the Earth, and it needs to be kept private because the average human on the planet could not deal with that. And so they say what portion of our society would be the most damaged, and it would be, you would think it would be religion, but actually it's the science and engineering, people that think that they're on the cutting edge and they're ahead of everything else in the universe, in astronomy and physics and science. And in reality, they find out that we're thousands of years behind some of the extraterrestrials. So we made progress. That's I guess how I got tabbed with the title of the whistleblower, and I sure didn't go out looking for it. But if that's what it takes to get the truth out there, so mote it be.
So be it. Yeah. Can you just tell us a bit about Vance Davis? What he said to you at the conference?
Okay. Well, Vance and I had made contact shortly after I ran into Mr. Hoagland up in Seattle, In fact, I had him. He was going to come up there in that area. Had him fly up and spend almost a week with me, and of course, he had contact when he was part of the military in Germany, and he was one of the communications, not officers, but communications people between the Russian side of the Berlin Wall and on our side, the West German side. So Vance Davis, and he had a number of experiences which caused him to take the risk of he and a couple of the others to leave Germany, fly to the United States, go to into Florida and that area, and then once they were discovered and found, they were given a discharge. It wasn't a dishonorable discharge. They were just given a discharge.
They were given an honorable discharge.
Ah, there you go. They did get that.
Yeah, they wanted to cover it up, because the reason why they left was because they were playing with a Ouija board,
right,
that they were taught to do over at Fort Meade to contact. They were trying to use it to see if they could communicate with someone on the other side. So, this ET pops in and basically tells them that they need to get out of the Army now and go to Gulf Breeze, that we'll meet you there or we'll be there. So that's exactly what they did. They listened to their intuition and this Ouija board because, well, it must have been strange to be contacted by some interdimensional or extraterrestrial type being. So that's what they did. Well, Vance Davis went back to Gulf Breeze, where they had learned, a lot of some of this NSA secret stuff. And when he got out of the military, he continued to work for the NSA. And they had special projects which were classified something like the Manhattan Project, of satellite dishes on the moon. And they do have satellite dishes on the moon for which they communicate with ET and have had them for a very long time. That's what Vance said when he saw me at the conference. And they had help from ET to build them, that the relay goes from our dish array on Earth called SETI or Palo Alto, and the VLA. Of course, it could be, I call it SETI, CETI, Communications with Extraterrestrial Intelligence, because that's basically what they're doing.
Yeah, you showed him some of the pictures from my archive that showed the antennas as well as some of the base there, and that's what triggered him to starting to come forward. He has remained silent for the last 25 years, I think is about that. I ran into him in 1995. So, and it's just been the last. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I don't know if he has any intention to come forward, but that was information for us, Ken.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Right. Well, have we been told never to return to the moon then?
No. We were not told never to return to the moon. We were told we're not ready. We were told.
Oh, God. I like it. Because when you speak to other people, they say, oh, we've been told we can't go back there again.
Well, I think
we do have bases there, but, for the most part, humanity is not ready.
Yeah. Now, Bret, Trump just recently said that we're going back to the moon.
Yeah, he's very interested, of course, in mining and developing some mining that they're already doing there. So anything that they're telling us, they already have been doing.
Yeah.
It's just the public doesn't know yet.
Well, yes. We're doing our best. We're doing our best to let the public know.
As far as I could gather, the Japanese wanted to go to the moon this year.
They have the capability.
Well, one of their extraterrestrial ancestors was already on the moon. You ever heard of that big Manhattan-sized ship? And they had a triangular ship that they found a little ET in. Well, that little ET is one of their ancient ancestors, the little Mona Lisa being or whatever. Of course, the video and all of that was fake, but it was based on a real story, an actual story. That goes all the way back to the Japanese history, and their first mother was an extraterrestrial woman.
And that was later on is where it came into the Mother Mary. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bret, but that's where the society, the history, ancient history ties into within the last 2,000 years.
Yes, the ancient mother was definitely an extraterrestrial or an earth spirit. Absolutely.
Yeah, because there's Matthew in the chat room. He says, where does God live?
Everywhere.
I would suggest...
There was God and E.T.
Wherever he wants, yeah.
Well, I would say Bret is probably one of the most knowledgeable people that I know that has been able to go back and tie in the ancient histories of before the ancient Sumerians and all that, can tie all of this all the way up to the current space program. And I'm encouraging him to, because he's taking the information and literature, ancient literatures from many sources, but he's been able to knit them together to make an absolutely intelligent, proof, documented story of the ancient history of humans on this planet and what's been going on. So yeah, I'll sit back and listen to him all day long.
Thanks, Ken.
Yes, I would.
I don't have time for that right now.
Oh, I'm going to get you out in front. I'm going to put you in front. I'm coming behind.
I like it. We're nearly running out of time. You know, the hour's gone so quickly as usual when I've got two fantastic guests on.
You bet. So we only get till 1? Is it 2?
Unfortunately. You know, where can people get in touch with you, Ken, and you, Bret, if they've got any information they want to relay to you?
I'm pretty easy to find. You just go on the internet and go to kenjohnstonmedia.net. And we got hacked. I had .com for a long time, and then thanks to Oberg and the other minions of those debunkers trying to, they almost got me killed. And I want to go ahead and say that needs to be done right now, because people need to know what kind of ridiculous stuff that people like him have done. I was in India, and I had just finished up a week tour at universities and places giving lectures and talks, because India is developing quite a space program of their own. And then I had to fly back to Scottsdale, Arizona, and be a guest speaker there on the 12th of February last year, and then immediately take a plane back to India and go to the northwest side, which happens to be also a very high Muslim ISIS-controlled area of India. Yeah. And when I got there, they were treating me like a deity and up in the mountains and showing me around. And then about 1 o'clock in the morning, my escort comes in, and he's just perspiration just pouring off of him, and he's been up all night. He says, someone got in touch with our assistant director of science of India and told them that I was a liar, that I was just there to steal money from them, blah, 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 blah. I said, let me guess. That was James Oberg. He says, yeah. I said, when he's claiming that I never did any of this stuff. He says, right. I said, well, I've got documentations. I have had one of the books, newest books out at the time was Ken's Moon, the autobiography. And so they sent in one of their detectives or something at the resort where I was, and they went through my book, and they said, "Oh yeah, okay, we're going to try to get to the bottom of this." So they had me. This was at like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and so at 6 o'clock we had everything packed up, and took me a 2-hour trip out of the mountains back down to I thought we were going to go to the science, not the office of the government office, and clear everything up. Instead, they took a dirt road and stopped at an intersection where there was a lady standing at the intersection. My guide had to get out of the car. The lady got in. She was the same lady that met me at the airport and gave me all the honors that the Indians do. Anyway, and then we drove on another 20 minutes to the airport. They took me in, and they got the chief of security at the airport, put me in a holding room while they went and got me a ticket to get me from Chennai up to the capital of India, and
Delhi.
Yeah, and I was told don't come back. And I thought, wow. So
you probably don't know this, Ken, but they actually contacted me on Facebook, and I had to sit there and send them all of your documentation before they would release you.
Wow. Okay.
My God.
That is amazing. At any rate, so they cost me $1,200 out of my own pocket to pay for my ticket, which was ordinarily would have been paid for when I came as their guest to get back there. So for a period of 36 hours, my wife had no idea where I was or what had happened. And since then, I've received a couple of very nice letters from people, not quite as high as the president of India, or whatever, but that apologizing for the way I had been treated and inviting me back. But my wife won't let me go back again. She doesn't think that's the right thing for me to do.
No, it's not.
No, I wouldn't at that time.
Yep.
And
No.
I'll talk with them on Skype. I'll do Skype with them.
yeah. So where can people get in touch with you, Bret?
Well, they can go to the Lunar Anomaly Research Society on Facebook and join that group, and I'll talk to them there. Or they can contact me, Bret Colin Sheppard, COLIN SHEPPARD on Facebook, or you can go to portalsofknowing.com.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Next time, we'll have to have a lot longer next time.
That'd be great.
It'd be a pleasure.
But it was
Yeah.
fun. Thank you. Thank you, Bill.
So, yeah, Matthew just thought, all right, guys, I have to apologize, but we have to jet. Thanks for a fantastic show. This young lad who keeps listening to all my shows, and he loves all my guests. So that's fantastic.
Thank you. Just have them come to KenJohnstonMedia.net.
Yep.
Hey, oh, yeah. But, you know, it's always nice when we have two fantastic guests on the show who we can talk to and everybody like that. So next Wednesday, I've got Mark and Phyllis Brickenoff next week, or next Wednesday. So we should have a fantastic show with Mark and Phyllis from New York. We always have a great time with them. Thank you to Susan for being the producer of the show.
Thank you, Susan.
And thank you to everybody in the chat room as well. And thank you to Bret and Ken for being our guests on the show today. Everyone have a lovely weekend, and bye for now. We'll talk to you in a minute.